The history of medicine is not always a tale of doctors saving lives with miraculous remedies. On the contrary, there were bizarre and dangerously misguided treatments that not only failed to heal, but actually killed patients faster than any disease. Surely you've heard of some of the outrageous stories from the past. But did you know that some of these progressive medical methods were trusted by royalty and the elite? One of the most controversial practices was bloodletting, which doctors of the time believed could detoxify the body. In reality, this method killed thousands by causing them to lose so much blood that they could not be saved. Then there was the use of mercury to treat syphilis, which was considered a cutting-edge therapy, yet it was actually the cause of numerous deaths from poisoning. And let's not forget the use of urine, which some doctors claimed could cure bizarre diseases. These treatments didn't just cause pain, they led to death on a regular basis in hospitals. Today, it's hard to imagine a doctor using such methods, but in the past, these were the solutions people trusted, even though they destroyed countless lives. Let's explore the most terrifying medical practices ever used. Stories so shocking that you'll find it hard to believe they were once considered treatments. In the medieval and Renaissance periods, medicine was still in its infancy. Doctors were often just as likely to harm their patients as to heal them, armed with little more than superstitions, crude tools, and limited knowledge. However, their understanding of the body was extremely limited, and they frequently turned to drastic, invasive measures, believing they were aiding the healing process. From royalty to commoners, people trusted these methods, unaware of the dire consequences. With no knowledge of microbes or modern hygiene, many treatments involved unthinkable risks, and the very people meant to care for the sick often ended up inadvertently condemning them to a more horrific fate. The scientific methods we now rely on were centuries away, and many of the treatments available were based on old myths and theories that had no real understanding of human biology. While we today have access to life-saving drugs and advanced medical procedures, those living in the past didn't have that luxury. Instead, they had bloodletting, mercury, and even urine therapy practices that not only failed to cure the sick, but often caused greater harm. At the time, doctors were often considered learned professionals, respected for their supposed expertise. In an age where superstition and tradition ruled, medical practices were frequently governed by nothing more than guesses, trial and error, and sometimes sheer desperation. These treatments weren't just ineffective, they were lethal. And for many, the hospital bed became the last place they would see. Let's dive deeper into some of the most bizarre and deadly medical practices that once dominated healthcare, and understand how the lack of knowledge about the human body contributed to these horrifying outcomes. Throughout many centuries, medical treatments were not only ineffective but often led to worse outcomes, with doctors practicing methods that were fundamentally wrong and lacked understanding of the human body. One of the most prominent treatments was bloodletting, a procedure that doctors of the Middle Ages and Renaissance believed could cleanse the body and restore balance to the body's humors. While it may have seemed logical to them, in reality it was a deadly mistake. Doctors of that era believed that urine could cleanse the body and treat a wide variety of diseases. These methods didn't just fail to cure, they killed patients and left them with lasting physical consequences. In fact, many patients had to endure excruciating pain, sometimes resulting in death because they could not bear such brutal methods. Patients didn't know they were being treated as experimental subjects, and instead of being healed, they were subjected to the fatal effects of these misguided treatments. These mistakes were not only a sign of the ignorance of the time, but also a painful reminder of the brutality of an era that applied such deadly methods. Especially the urine of the patients themselves was believed to have magical healing properties. However, using urine led to serious infections and worsened patients' conditions. These treatments didn't just fail to heal, they exacerbated the suffering, making the illness even more unbearable. Bloodletting was a very common practice, used for a wide range of illnesses, from the common cold to more serious conditions like fevers and even mental illness. The belief was that by removing blood, it would help rid the body of toxins and restore balance. Doctors of the time used mercury to treat syphilis and other sexually transmitted diseases. However, rather than curing the illness, mercury was a highly toxic substance, capable of causing severe poisoning. Symptoms of mercury poisoning included tremors, pain, neurological disorders, and organ damage. Mercury was considered a cutting-edge remedy for diseases, but in reality, it caused far more harm than good. Many patients suffered and died from mercury poisoning without realizing that the very treatment they trusted was causing their demise. However, the human body requires a specific amount of blood to function, and excessive blood loss could result in shock, low blood pressure, and even death. Patients who underwent bloodletting often couldn't recover because their bodies lost too much blood, and the recovery process, if done properly, would take far too long. Many patients died due to blood loss shock, or their bodies couldn't cope with such extreme blood depletion. Even though many doctors and practitioners believed in bloodletting, patients who underwent this treatment suffered severe and lasting consequences. What's terrifying is that these patients didn't know they were being treated incorrectly until it was too late. In addition to bloodletting, mercury was another common treatment. Another bizarre treatment involved the use of urine as a healing method. These medical practices not only highlight the lack of knowledge in ancient medicine, but also serve as proof that sometimes those meant to heal were actually the biggest threat to patients. Along with bloodletting, mercury, and urine, other treatments were used to cure diseases, such as surgical amputations without anesthesia, or crude and painful methods like incisions to treat illnesses. As centuries passed, these bizarre medical practices did not simply fade into the shadows of history. Instead, they became deeply ingrained in the fabric of society. While today, we look back at these treatments with horror, for people in the past, they were the only option available. Physicians, who were regarded as the ultimate authorities on health, were trusted implicitly, even when they were perpetuating practices that were just as likely to harm as they were to heal. The Renaissance period, in particular, was marked by a wave of superstition. Lead-based remedies were commonly used for ailments, ranging from digestive issues to skin diseases. For example, Paracelsus, a Swiss physician in the 16th century, was both a pioneer and a charlatan. Though he is credited with introducing new ideas about chemistry and medicine, he also relied heavily on mercury as a cure for everything from syphilis to mental illness. Ironically, some of his treatments ended up killing more people than they helped, as he often used mercury without any understanding of its toxicity. Entire generations of people had suffered, not from their illnesses, but from the treatments that were supposed to heal them. The lingering effects of these disastrous practices were felt long after they were abandoned. The stories of those who fell victim to them remain a testament to the darkness that once existed in the world of medicine, where hope and trust were often placed in the wrong hands. His influence was so profound that many continued using mercury long after it had been proven to be lethal. It was believed to be a cure-all, but in reality, it caused severe poisoning over time. For example, bloodletting was sometimes accompanied by the use of charms, potions, and spells. European colonists in the Americas, for example, would impose their own medical practices on native populations, many of which were ineffective and harmful. Despite the widespread failure of these treatments, they persisted for generations. Even as new medical knowledge emerged, people continued to place their faith in outdated and dangerous practices because they had no other alternatives. Physicians would offer patients magical remedies alongside their physical treatments, promising cures based on mysticism or superstition. These so-called magic potions were often made from toxic plants or minerals that, far from healing, poisoned those who took them. Known as Saturnine poisoning, the symptoms included abdominal pain, fatigue, memory loss, and organ failure. People treated with lead-based medicines often lived with the debilitating effects for years before eventually succumbing to the poison. This was yet another example of how the medical field's reliance on flawed theories and dangerous substances led to widespread harm and experimentation, and it was during this time that some of the most dangerous and deadly methods were employed. For instance, one of the most famous, yet incredibly misguided, treatments involved the use of cauterization. In an attempt to stop bleeding or to seal wounds, doctors would apply hot iron or fire directly to the wound. The burning of flesh was believed to purge the body, and many believed it could cure a range of ailments, from infections to abscesses. But instead of aiding the healing process, cauterization often led to severe burns, infections, and irreversible tissue damage. It was not uncommon for patients to die from sepsis or shock following this brutal procedure. Another chilling example comes from the practice of trepanation, or the act of drilling a hole into the skull. While the intention behind this procedure was to treat conditions like epilepsy or to release evil spirits from the brain, the reality was far more grim. Patients often died from infections or complications due to the primitive tools used, and the lack of sterilization made the procedure even more lethal. Surprisingly, this technique continued for centuries, even after it became clear that it was both dangerous and ineffective. The idea of relieving pressure on the brain by drilling holes in the skull persisted well into the 18th century, as doctors struggled to explain mental and neurological disorders with the limited knowledge available to them. The use of lead in medicine also skyrocketed during this period, despite its known toxicity. In fact, some of the most revered and respected doctors of the time were no better than quacks who took advantage of the trust placed in them by the public. In addition to these dangerous treatments, there were also magical cures that were often mixed into medical practices. As these methods gained popularity, they began to spread to different parts of the world, carried by trade, war, and colonialism. As the centuries went by, these practices were slowly replaced with more scientific and effective methods, but the damage had already been done. These treatments, though bizarre and often lethal, represent a pivotal moment in human history, an era when the understanding of medicine was still in its infancy, and the line between healing and harm was tragically blurred. As we look back at these horrific treatments, it's clear that the history of medicine is marked not only by progress but by tragic errors and unimaginable suffering. The countless lives lost due to bloodletting, mercury poisoning, and other misguided practices remind us that medicine, in its early stages, was far from the precise science we know today. Doctors, who were revered as learned professionals, often inflicted the most harm, not out of malice, but out of ignorance. It was only by studying these mistakes, by acknowledging the lives lost to unproven methods, that true progress could be made. While we may have advanced significantly in our medical knowledge, it's important to remember that modern medicine, too, is not infallible. What we consider groundbreaking today could, in the future, be looked back upon as outdated or even dangerous. The tragedies of the past serve as lessons for the future, urging us to never stop questioning and to always seek better answers. After all, as history has shown, the price of ignorance in medicine can be far too high. Just as the people of the past believed in the efficacy of bloodletting and mercury, we too must question and critically evaluate the treatments and technologies of our time. The development of the scientific method, advances in hygiene, and a deeper understanding of human anatomy and diseases led to the rise of modern medical practices. However, the ghosts of these past treatments still linger, reminding us of the dangers of unverified knowledge and the importance of critical thinking in the field of medicine. They were working with limited knowledge, using methods that seemed sensible at the time but were ultimately disastrous. These ancient treatments didn't just fail to cure, their very existence reveals a profound lack of understanding about the human body. And more often than not, they ended lives rather than saving them. What's even more unsettling is the fact that these practices were widespread and trusted by those who were supposed to have the answers to our suffering. They mark the struggle between trust in authority and the search for truth. And while those who suffered under these brutal treatments are long gone, their stories live on as a reminder that progress often comes with great cost. In many ways, these failures became the bedrock of modern medicine. The tragedies of the past also serve as a warning. Though the practice of bloodletting and the use of mercury and urine therapy have long been abandoned, they are crucial chapters in the story of human perseverance and learning. As we continue to push the boundaries of medical science, let's remember the past, honor the lives lost, and ensure that we never repeat the same mistakes. If the story of these bizarre medical treatments has made you reflect on the progress of modern medicine, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an upcoming video. Share this story with your friends and family so we never forget that advancements in medicine sometimes come at a very high price, and that history offers us valuable lessons we must not ignore. Let's continue to learn from the past and build a healthier future together.